Welcome to Be Customer Led, where we'll explore how leading experts in customer and employee experience are navigating organizations through their own journey to be customer led and the actions and behaviors employees and businesses exhibit to get there. And now, your host, Bill Stakos.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another week of Be Customer Led. Another special guest for you all. Todd Unger is Chief Experience Officer and the SVP for Marketing and Member Experience at the American Medical Association, or what we would call in the States, the AMA, lovingly called the AMA. The AMA, by the way, for reference for our international listeners, is an institution that focuses on physicians in the medical field and has been around for over 170 years. So a really important organization in the U.S., but in the medical field overall. Todd, thank you so much for coming on the show. Super excited to have you here.
Hey, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Todd, I just kind of given what you're doing and your role, a lot of what we're going to talk about is how to, set up organizationally for success. You've got a really expansive remit at the AMA. Love what you're doing and how you're bringing things together. And I think our listeners are going to be absolutely floored when we have this conversation. But just a little bit of background and context, like how did you get into this space and what has your journey been?
Well, I have a pretty unusual background. I started my career in good old-fashioned consumer marketing. I worked for Procter & Gamble on brands like, Scope mouthwash, Metamucil, exciting things like this. And then spent another, 7 years at a big ad agency that happens to be here in Chicago called Leo Burnett. Worked on big consumer brands, Sony among them, and then plastic products made by Glad. That is where I had my first big product invention. Gladware plastic containers changed my life.
That was you. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah. But that's where I was really excited about product development, and it brought a lot of streams together for me. And I wanted to do that in this wacky new space called digital, which at the time was just called internet or whatever it was. One of my bosses at Leo Burnett said, it's the worst decision I ever made in my life was to go to America Online, which is what it was called at the time. And that was the beginning of what I'll call, my digital product management role and general management in terms of websites. And I did that, and then various and sundry media properties in New York, media and gaming. And then I transitioned into kind of phase 3, which I'll call commerce. And although it was in a very different space than I'm in now, it was in horse racing with the Daily Racing Form. If you've ever been to a horse race, you've seen these newspapers, people pouring through the numbers. Well, that's a really interesting digital data subscription, digital betting platform, premium content operation where all these things, because a lot of them are new, are starting to come together. So I didn't plan how that happened, but everything that I had done up to that point really prepared me for the Chief Experience Officer role at the AMA because, the context of a lot of the things that I do it's very different. Physicians, obviously, very different audience, the underlying work. And what I've come to think of as experience relies on all those things that I've done. That's hard to kind of make that up, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, totally agree. So let's start there maybe, Todd. So when you think about the work that you're doing at the AMA, you're bringing together not only sort of your more traditional customer experience type functions, but also marketing, digital, community, which I think is interesting. And I think a lot more are following that model. In fact, the organizations that are probably more ahead of the curve in their maturity, perhaps from a broader CX perspective, are bringing all these disciplines together and working with them in interesting ways. So, can you just help just kind of go a little bit, if you can, just a little bit of detail for the listeners, how you're doing that and how you're bringing that all together?
Yeah, I think in this day and age, and I think it's largely driven by digital, you have to bring those things together. When I arrived at the AMA and I had this, title that I'd never had before, again, I am not above looking on Google as to determine what I'm supposed to be doing. And there was not a great definition of experience that could guide me. And so this is 5 years ago. So I had to make one up that I thought really was relevant for this day and age. And I call it the seamless integration of product, marketing, commerce, and service to grow and retain customers. So I put that out on LinkedIn as on my third anniversary based on what I learned, and most people agreed. I've seen some new definitions coming from other places that have a lot in common with that, but to me, that's what constitutes experience these days.
Yeah.
And while I didn't have all of those elements in place when I first arrived at the AMA, I do now. And obviously I don't oversee our mission areas. They're doing great work, and I rely on them to do that. And my job is to make sure people know about it and engage with it. I've never really had all those levers in place. And now that I do, I really appreciate it, because you can see how it drives growth. And when all those pieces are not in place together, there's just so much friction. And so I think that, that learning comes because in a digital world, I would say experience has been redefined. And, relative to where I was at Procter & Gamble, where, people think of like that funnel, and people, you proceed sequentially through awareness and interest and trial. It's a long journey, as I say. Now I call, what I say is it's the 10-second customer journey. And the theme song was written by Ariana Grande, and it's, I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it, right? That's what it takes. You have this like thing pops in your mind. You might have thought it was your own, but it's probably 70% controlled by algorithms. And then you start that exploration process, and you can be from like ideation to completion in 10 seconds. And any part along that way that throws this little obstacle is so costly.
Yeah.
It can delay or just eliminate, because people's attention spans are they just don't have a lot of time. And so if I can't complete the transaction from idea to research to commerce to completion in that little increment of time that I have, you lose me.
The concept of digital convenience is talked a lot about, and I think it's just been so heightened over the last 18 months or so. But, to that point, though, there are a lot of organizations in their rush to digital. There's just a lot of digital, like tech debt out there, right? As well. They weren't thoughtful as much. They just got the kind of product out there. The fact that an organization like the AMA has been doing this and was ahead of that curve and bringing all these organizations or disciplines and functions together, rather, you guys are just well ahead, and it clearly shows. I mean, you guys are serving 250,000 members plus, right? Over
270,000.
270. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to exclude those 20.
We're on our way to hopefully our 11th consecutive year of growth. Record-breaking year for membership growth last year.
Awesome.
In the middle of a pandemic, and that is a testament to the work, also to experience.
When you think about that growth and how are you thinking about the core tenets of experience from that perspective? I really love the Ariana Grande reference, and that sort of like the 10-second rule, we can call it that. You should call it that, actually, and trademark that. But
I'm going to give credit to, I went through this long explanation about it and described this thing. And then someone said, 10-second customer journey. And I said, I'm stealing that.
Totally stealing
LinkedIn. I have stolen that.
Good for you for doing that. But what do you think are those core tenets? 2 or 3 things that you believe are the, sort of that at the coalface things that you guys need to deliver every day to engage and to help grow the medical practice and field.
Yeah, I think that's where you guys number one, just to what we talked about, is redefining what experience means. In our case, all of those pieces of the operation were not seamless and they were not unified. And as a result, the number one thing that I heard when I showed up on day one was, I don't know what the AMA does. And then you might get just like a stream of complaints. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And I'm like, we're doing that. You don't know that. Well, there's a reason, because we never told anybody. It was a very old kind of, the model had not caught up with digital in terms of how we were putting out that information. In terms of membership, was primarily a direct mail operation. And there wasn't a connection between that day I signed up and the day I was asked to renew. All right. And the digital platform, and particularly through content, is how we've created an experience that reaches them every day, basically our audience. Now, I always say there are also other core tenets. Like, it sounds cliche to say, put your customer at the center. And for us, it was putting members at the center. We ultimately are trying to have an impact on patients and health. And our way is through physicians, through residents, medical students to do that. And, putting them at the center of every part of the operation made a huge difference in terms of knowing what they need and what they want, developing a compelling proposition for this audience and delivering. And then I will say there's the under the hood part of the work here, which is you are competing, as everybody knows, with every other, digital convenience operation out there. Your funnel, which is not a term was used 5 years ago, better work. And so all of the mechanics and the infrastructure and the non-sexy things that constitute the commerce funnel right now, from your sign-up operation, customer service, self-service, to the site, everything, and the way that you measure everything has got to work. And then there's the stuff that sits on top of it. That's the stuff that everybody sees that is grounded in best practices of today's consumer marketing. Has got to sit on top of that, and they all got to work together. Like, I'm sure you've done this thing where you I would say you are what you search for today.
100%. Yeah.
And so, of course, you see something in your Instagram feed or whatever, and you click on that, and where that takes you is just so important. And what it says there, and how easy it is to move from there. Because again, you've got that split second experience. I was telling my team, if you you can't communicate on that next page in one line and 3 bullet points and cause someone to click on whatever that action is, you're done. Just start over.
Yep. Totally agree. Yeah. I mean, just the attention span because of social media has gotten so narrow, and just a lot of it is people are just busier generally too, right? I mean, work has evolved and changed. Life outside of work has evolved and changed in a very, very short period of time, driving completely new needs and ways of interacting with brands or companies. I'm with you 100%. I keep on going back in my head.
The big difference is everybody's busy, right? I don't think there's I don't know, ever been a time when people are not busy and say, I don't have enough time to do things. But as always, you always make time for the things that you're interested in.
100%.
Right? So, that's why your feed is filled with things you like.
Yeah.
Because they know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
So now you're just surrounded by all these things that you like. So what do you got to do? Today's environment, you got to be something someone likes and that they're interested in. Everybody's an enthusiast and wants to know more about it. So I never thought I would be in it, thinking of this like an enthusiast audience, but it is.
Yeah, and that's right. You've got to. I never thought about that, Todd. It's a really interesting point. You've got to differentiate even more than the things that you've liked that are in your feed that you're being marketed with and bombarded with every single day of every single minute, right?
Somebody's got to prime you away from looking at suit supply. I mean, otherwise, I just don't have a personal business model here.
So when you think about just the way that that your team is organized at the AMA, what are some of the benefits that you're seeing by bringing together some of these these disciplines versus maybe at prior lives? What are you noticing? Maybe inside or even with numbers.
The first and foremost is a unified vision of what our operation constitutes and what the goal is. And it's growth. And that is not always clear in marketing operations or in experience operations, but that's what we're all about. Then you can focus on all of the levers that constitute growth, which many of we talked about. It starts with a clear understanding of your target audience and the development of a compelling consumer proposition that sits under it. And I would say neither of those things were fully understood or elaborated upon arrival, and it takes a while to get there. So in our field, there's something, and in any company, there's a mission, right? But that's not the same as a consumer proposition, which is there's what we do versus what we do for you. That's how I eventually got to explain it. And so, we got to this set of words: the physician's powerful ally in patient care. Where every word of that is chosen, and then we have supporting proposition for that. And then the model was about demonstrating that. And the channels that underlied that then started to come together. And I would say, what we noticed over the course of time is it's those handoffs between like the proposition, the target definition. There are some aspects of that of the operation that we kind of owned in my team, like email, but didn't own in terms of website and content development. And you can measure what impact that has in terms of the handoffs. And it became apparent that putting all those things together in one place was a much more efficient engine. And people responded, and you can see it, you see it in the numbers, and you can quantify every step along the way. And then there's the fun stuff, which is really bringing the member forward. And that started with like just celebrating them. And we started this campaign called Membership Moves Medicine. We used a celebrity photographer to start photographing physicians. We eliminated stock photography in all of our marketing materials.
Awesome.
You would go into one of our two big meetings and see a 40-foot poster of a physician looking like what they are, which are heroes.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I say sometimes I don't think people actually saw members except live at these meetings. They weren't in the hallway on these pictures, and they weren't in our materials, and they weren't on the website. And bringing that forward and making that tangible is a huge change. And now it's led us to the next part of this, which is amplifying their voices above the misinformation and other sources of scientific and medical advice. We'll put that in quotation marks that people are getting. It's a bigger purpose.
I'm blown away. I've got more questions for you, Todd, but if I could end an episode somewhere, that would be it. But I've got more. I want to get deeper here.
Yeah.
If you think about the flip side of that, though, right, of the benefits, what challenges maybe has that created, right? Because you guys serve multiple different audiences, not just physicians. You've got physicians, residents, students, state and specialty societies, et cetera. It's 1.5 million physicians, there's 250,000 members, plus everyone in that ecosystem that you're engaging. What types of challenges are inherent in that model? Not just sort of the benefits of bringing that together too. And,
listen, first of all, while we have 270,000 members, we represent
270.
all physicians.
I keep on saying 250.
That's all right. I'm not, listen, I fought hard for that growth, so I'm not going to let you go.
You should absolutely take that for it.
So we represent all physicians. We represent, all residents, all medical students, member or not. And, the challenge is, they're at every aspect of that, which is understanding that just like everyone out there, not all physicians are the same. And they're not interested in the same things. They don't want to be engaged with in the same way. And so segmentation driven by data was a major revelation for us in terms of how we communicate with our audience. And so, there was a lot of blocking and tackling at the basic marketing realm to overcome. The second thing is this organization does so much great work. And so we have operations that focus on improving people's health outcomes, like in hypertension or diabetes. We have major initiatives in reducing obstacles, which a huge one right now is physician burnout in the area of wellness. We have advocacy initiatives right now where things are happening all over the place that are not good for medicine, that we have to speak with a unified voice for, and things like health equity, where we are really trying to reduce disparities in the outcomes of health and make sure people have optimal health for everybody. So there is a lot going on. Now, how do you knit that all into one message so that when somebody sees one line and 3 bullet points, that's a challenge. But we found that. Some of it's through good old-fashioned listening and data supported by digital.
Awesome.
So that's, I think when you think about the pandemic, which has been just a horrible experience and defining experience for everyone. And, think about what physicians have gone through in something like this. This, I think, has been a defining moment for this organization because we could bring it under a stream and say, what does it mean to be a physician's powerful ally in patient care in the middle of a pandemic? Well, here's what it means. And then the whole organization kind of pulls together and delivers that. And that is one message, not 8. So that's, the challenge that we operate with.
I think about we're still going through it, right? It's not like I talk about it like it's in a past tense sometimes, but we're still going through it. And whether you're in a hospital or you're in some other kind of medical facility, you're living this in so many different ways, inside and outside of that location. It's amazing the work that you guys are doing.
I was going to say, I get to do a podcast too.
I know, I want to talk
video
about that
every day. And that to me, it's been another aspect of listening, putting members at the center, amplifying physician voices. We started that out, because it was hard to get the word out about everything that was happening. And think back to March of 2020, whatever year that was, I can't remember. But so we said, let's start this. Like, we're not expert producers.
Yeah.
I'm not a television host, but we were scrappy and we did it. And it's evolved over the course of the time to millions of views on it, expanded into, content, digital content and podcasts. And listen, I'm going to tell you what, when you get to talk to a physician every day about what they're going through and tell that story to an audience, it changes you. Like, there's no focus group, no research survey that does what really hearing from someone about their story, what they're trying to do, and see, the thing, people say physicians have a calling, like, why else would you get in this and like be around sick people in an emergency room, like during a pandemic? It's because you have a calling to do this work. And boy, I don't know of another job where people throw so much at you to get in the middle of that as being a doctor. And so it has just dramatically increased my appreciation for everybody in this field. And I hope that by letting them tell their stories and being that platform for them, that we can have others have that sense of appreciation too. So
here I am going to make a plug. What's the name of the podcast so our listeners hear from you? I know what the podcast name is, obviously, but.
It's funny. It was, we did have something called the AMA COVID-19 update. We thought we were going to transition out of that back in June. That did not happen. So we still have that going. And now our other kind of eventual thing that we're doing in parallel is called AMA Moving Medicine, where you get to hear actual experts, not the ones that think they're experts, but people who actually know what they're talking about medicine and healthcare. And are movers and shakers in that field. So you can find that out at ama-assn.org/podcasts. You can see all those, find us on our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to yours. I think I have it down at this point.
You totally got it down, man. And we'll put that in the show notes, because I actually encourage people to go listen to the podcast and hear the stories. It will give you new perspective and meaning of what's happening around us, right? In a major way. So Todd, one question that, I want to ask, and given how you all are far ahead of the maturity curve on this, where do you see the discipline evolving and going, right? Like, there's so much noise out there. CX is dead, blah, blah, blah. Clearly it's not happening where you are. And I think that you all are getting it right in terms of, pulling the pieces together. Like, what's your perspective on how that might evolve and come together further?
Well, I'll just tell you definitively, CX is not dead. The discipline of CX, the tools, the measurement, and the goals are there, and they're becoming more sophisticated. And I think you can see that out in the field right now. I think the change is coming in terms of how it's been defined, and it's become more expansive. And through the power of what has happened with digital transformation, the ownership and center of CX is shifting. I also see it as, the goals have not been clearly articulated. And I think it's much more compelling if you say the goal of CX is growth, because I think a lot of CX has been like in the measurement and intermediary terminology that people are like sometimes not compelled to invest in. But I'll tell you what they invest in. They invest in growth.
100%.
And so, what I see out there right now is a realignment of where CX lives. And it's probably aligning more on the growth side, where people are having this seamless experience. I'll tell you one quick funny story. I did see somebody, I was at a conference and I saw somebody get up and talk about, their CX operation, which was a standalone operation. And they went through kind of a case study of something they're doing, which was like the welcome journey and about all the measurement and what they should send out. And I'm like, why is that sitting in a separate CX group? If I were like I'm trying to generate and retain members, and like
Yeah.
there's some other group out there doing that. Like that's friction.
Yeah, it is.
And so someone has to sit on top of that operation and make sure all the seamless parts of it are working together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily an executive position that is defined that way right now. I think it's an evolution, and you're seeing aspects of it in CM, chief marketing officers, chief experience officers,
Yeah.
chief growth officers,
Yeah.
COOs. Like
Yeah.
we haven't caught up yet, but I think every organization is going to have to move to a place where CX is built into the fabric of the growth operation.
Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing a lot of as well the concept of the chief strategy officer and the chief experience officer coming together on some level, right? Because you're just embedding CX into the fabric then that way, right? And everyone's aligning towards this constant or this model around growth. I've always been an advocate of when I'm talking to new CX leaders or others in the marketplace, I was like, I always had 3 goals. And whenever I talk to a CEO, I wouldn't say, my job here is to increase satisfaction or improve NPS and loyalty, all good stuff that will be a result. But I'm here to drive growth. I'm here to find and drive efficiencies in this organization. I'm here to make it a better culture. Like if you can't, right? And I love that the growth one is really important. And I would over-index on growth 100% because it's a much better rallying cry than Bill's here to cut headcount or like make us more efficient in some way. But like
I was just say, without those other 2 things, it's not a sustainable model. I think it's like I don't mean to assume them, but I think you're absolutely right. And I will tell you that the impact of what we've done in terms of defining experience has been a transformative thing in terms of culture.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right.
Very cool. I got one more question for you, Todd, if that's okay. One, this has been a really inspirational conversation for me, frankly. And I love what you're doing, what the AMA's mission is, and what they're doing just especially considering what we're all going through right now. And in particular, where do you go for your inspiration?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm inspired by a lot of things. I'm underneath it all. Like I love marketing, and I have so much appreciation for people who create amazing things and know how to communicate. Mm-hmm. And so I take it in, like every moment of my day is like intake. I finally had to stop myself basically because like I didn't want to bother like my team like on the weekends, but like I'm just a constant source like of ideas. Yeah. And they come from all over the place. And I think the key thing that I think you develop over time is the ability to synthesize a lot of inputs and come up with an idea out of that. And I'll give you a great example of this. Like, because of like the kind of contact that I get to have with our members every day and to see what they're doing and the way my team has just delivered during this pandemic, I'm very, very moved by the plight of this community against misinformation. And I started thinking about this idea of how do we amplify physician voices? And I get to talk with this physician, Peter Hotez. You probably see him all over the place. And I was like, or even Dr. Mike, who's like the big YouTube doctor, right? And this idea of science and storytelling has been knocking around in my noggin for a while. And it finally came together. This idea of science and storytelling, how to make physician voices the loudest in the room. The inspiration is you get it in that idea, but then to see it like brought to life by the things that, the people on my team do and what these physicians have to say and how they pull together and how we can really build a platform to confront what I think is one of the greatest problems facing this country right now. I get a kick out of that. Just like I got a kick from seeing that display container I built for Procter & Gamble in the grocery aisle number 9, 25 years ago. So there you go.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Man, this has been a really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much again for coming on to the show. Love the work that you are doing, clearly having an impact, and obviously the wonderful work that the AMA is doing for its community. And thank you for all you guys are all doing every day. So it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Big shout out to all the physicians, residents, medical students out there for everything you're doing and their care teams. Thanks for letting us tell this story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, everybody. Fantastic show. Wonderful conversation. We'll see you next week. Talk to you soon, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Be Customer Led with Bill Stakos. We are grateful to our audience for the gift of their time. Be sure to visit us at becustomerled.com for more episodes. Leave us feedback on how we're doing or tell us what you want to hear more about. Until next time, we're out.